Hello, I'm Andrew Pritchard, and thank you for watching today's Northeast Regional Forecast, brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Your snapshot view here looking at the Week 1 and Week 2 precipitation forecast remaining drier overall across the Northeast region from the Central Plains into the Eastern Corn Belt and then up in towards the Northeast region, seeing drier weather overall with this ridge across the Central and the Eastern U.S. Our wild card, though, going to be Tropical Storm Barry and its remnants as they make their way north and then curve off to the east. The Week 2 time period, it does look like as the ridge strengthens, it will begin to shift off to the west as we head into the later part of the Week 2 time period, and that means that we could see our thunderstorm clusters resume here from the northern plains into the Great Lakes and then parts of the Northeast region, perhaps turning a little bit more active. But dry overall for the Week 1 period, and then perhaps taking on a more active look as we head into Week 2. Your temperature forecast for the next 10 days, starting with the first 5 here over on the left, seeing a big impact down here in the south from Tropical Storm Barry. Close to average, if not a little bit warmer than average across the Northeast region over the next 5 days. But then as we head into the 5 days that follow there, the 18th through the 22nd, really looking like we're going to turn the heat back on across a big chunk of the Midwest, but a big chunk of the Northeast as well. So widespread heat looking to build back into the almost the entire central and the eastern United States as we head into kind of the last 10 days of July or so. The last 24 hours of precipitation, it's been quite across the central U.S., but not so across the Northeast region here, seeing clusters of showers and thunderstorms making their way across the region. Looking at the last 14 days, though, drier overall across the central portions of the Northeast region. It's been active here across parts of Pennsylvania and surrounding areas, a little bit more active across northern Maine, but drier anomalies overall over the last 2 weeks. A morning check of the satellite picture here Friday morning, again seeing some showers and storms making their way out of the Northeast region here on Friday morning. Otherwise quiet across a huge chunk of the central United States, just watching a couple of thunderstorm clusters here in the Dakotas and the upper Midwest. And then here's our big wild card. This is Tropical Storm Barry. Very disorganized, but you can make out a very broad cyclonic flow around there, a broad counterclockwise flow, but again, a very disorganized system, and at this point only expected to maintain that tropical storm status. So we look at the high-resolution NAM model, taking this out through the weekend. You see the rain exiting here from the northeast. We do have a frontal boundary sagging in late Saturday into early Sunday, but I can show you that here. We'll go ahead and look at the total accumulated precip forecast. You see most of that falling here during the remainder of the day on Friday, and then some lighter precipitation. But here comes this front, and I'm going to go ahead and I'll step through time with this one so you can pick it up. Give me 1 second here down to get to the scroller bar. So we'll take this out. We'll go through the day on Saturday. And this is Friday, but we'll go through the day on Saturday. And now here you see this front kind of slowly making its way into the Northeast region. And when I flip over and show you the instability associated with this, so this is the fuel that our thunderstorms work from, that they draw their energy from. We'll go ahead and take this towards the end of this loop. You see the frontal boundary making its way from left to right there, making its way into the Northeast region now. Very weak instability. When we get into the summer, we're looking for these deeper red colors like you see over parts of the Dakotas, you see down here in the Gulf of Mexico. But some of these values up here, the more rich orange and red colors. And as this frontal boundary moves through here late Saturday into early Sunday, the timing just isn't quite right to really have the strong instability needed to kick off some more widespread, heavier rain-producing thunderstorms. So right now it looks like the bulk of the rain over the next 3 days does arrive here with what's left as this area of rain and thunderstorms gets out here on Friday, with that late Saturday, early Sunday frontal boundary probably not having much to work with. The next 3 days of severe weather outlooks, we do have a general risk of thunderstorms across northern portions of the Northeast region here on Friday. Again, here comes that next frontal boundary on Saturday. This is Saturday right here, and then Sunday down in the very bottom, with just a general risk of thunderstorms perhaps in the far northern tip of Maine, but quieting down as we get towards the back half of the weekend. Now here's Barry in the latest forecast, cone of uncertainty from the National Hurricane Center. They are the experts here in the world of tropical forecasting in the United States. Again, maintaining tropical storm strength, taking it up into the Mississippi River, and then hooking it to the east here as we get into the Ohio River Valley. Now, obviously, this is way out in the future for the Northeast region, but this does potentially have some impacts as we talk about portions of especially, Pennsylvania and surrounding areas, because as this makes its way further off to the east, still producing some pretty heavy rainfall, perhaps tracking eventually into parts of the Northeast region. So we're going to talk about it, but know that it's not an impact we'll be really feeling at the earliest until the middle part of next week. Now here is the long-range track, the forecast from the European Ensemble forecast. Each one of these little lines, each one of these tracks is an individual member of the European long-range model and its forecast track of the center of the circulation of Tropical Storm Barry. Obviously, by the time it gets into the Corn Belt in the Northeast or the Mid-Atlantic, not going to be a tropical storm anymore, just be talking about the remnants. But the consensus has been a sharper eastward turn. Earlier tracks had this thing kind of making a more northward journey into parts of central Illinois, northern Indiana. That does not seem to be the case so much anymore. We're really honing in on an eastward turn near the Ohio River Valley and taking this thing perhaps east-southeast and missing the northeast region overall, which again would favor that return of heat and dry weather across the northeast region as we get into mid to late next week. This is the really only wild card that we'll have to talk about in terms of eating away a chunk of that heat and perhaps delivering some precipitation and what overall is a drier pattern for much of the northeast region. So here comes Barry making landfall in Louisiana early in the day. Saturday is when we expect landfall, making its journey through the weekend northward through the lower Mississippi Valley. This is bad news there. They're dealing with flooding as a result of a lot of this heavy rain during the spring, which is still making its way down through the Mississippi River. So river levels already high in that area. Now we'll be adding a ton of rain from this tropical system. So bad news in that area. As we get into Tuesday evening now, it's starting to make its eastward turn across the Ohio River Valley. As you focus in on the northeast region, though, let me go ahead and bring this back up. Seeing things pretty quiet overall. After we get through this weekend, we see things shut down here early to mid next week. Perhaps a frontal boundary clipping the northern portions of the northeast region here late Tuesday and into Wednesday, but likely going to be remaining dry after we get past this weekend through much of next week, unless we see a more northward track here with Barry bringing some precipitation into the area. So here's the long-range forecast from the European model. Again, a lot of this happening here Friday and Saturday, maybe even early on Sunday, but really primarily happening on Friday. And then this is Barry making its way northward. We can compare the GFS and the European model side by side. This is the European on the left, the GFS over here on the right. We see a very similar track when we talk about Barry, but the GFS perhaps a little bit further east and even a little bit further south. So the northern edge of the precipitation on this can be very hard to pin down, and oftentimes we bust on the northern edge. Right now, the European keeping it a little bit further north, the GFS taking it pretty much along and south of the Ohio River Valley, keeping things drier then for a big chunk of the eastern Corn Belt. So we'll have to watch this closely, but we'll have multiple forecasts coming out between now and then. I guess my message is now that does look like a drier pattern overall across the northeast region. Now beyond that, once Barry gets out of here, we take a look at the jet stream, the long-range forecast in here to the getting through the 22nd of July. And that's when we see the ridge really strengthening across a big chunk of the central and the eastern U.S., and that means the resumption of a hot and dry pattern across, again, a big chunk of the central and the eastern United States. We can look at the temperature anomaly forecast for the same period here, and again, you really see the heat building, strongest over the central United States, parts of the eastern Corn Belt, but the northeast region still tapping in to those warmer temperature anomalies. And then, of course, this is July. It's the hottest time of year, so when we get warmer than average temperatures in July, that's when we really start to feel that heat. Now, we're not talking extreme heat. I'm not forecasting any record-breaking heat waves right now. That's something we'll have to kind of, if it is going to happen, we'll have to talk about that in the 1 week time frame. But just pointing out the return to a very hot summer pattern here as we head into especially mid to late parts of next week. Precipitation forecast here from the European long-range model, again, just kind of highlighting the pattern in what is an overall drier pattern from the central U.S. into parts of the eastern Corn Belt and then a big chunk of the northeast region. But as we get into the last part of the month of July here, getting into late July, perhaps seeing a shift back to a pattern that could favor thunderstorm clusters from the north and northern plains through the Great Lakes into at least northern portions of the northeast region. So hot and dry mid to late, or getting into middle to late next week, perhaps shifting back towards a more active and stormy pattern beyond July 22nd. Looking at the 5-day forecast for your high temperatures, just to close it out, cooler for the start to the weekend here, Friday with rain and clouds in the area, high temperatures in the 70s to the mid 80s, warming up into the weekend though, Saturday and then Sunday, seeing that second front make its way through, cooling us back down for the day on Sunday, and then rebounding as we head into next week. Here's your Monday high temperature forecast. And then Tuesday, building that heat back in, and that's going to be the theme as we head later into the week, just seeing things warm up slowly over time. As always, Eric Snodgrass will have an in-depth look at the evolution of the next 1 to 2 weeks in our Monday Morning Ag Forecast video. and I'll have your next Northeast Regional Forecast update midday on Tuesday. Have a great day and a wonderful weekend.